It's been almost a decade, but I remember that day as if it just happened. I was 17, teetering on the edge of adulthood, yet still feeling so trapped and helpless. My mother was driving me to school that morning, and what started as a small disagreement quickly spiraled into one of her infamous outbursts. I was used to these moments, angry words thrown like knives, the tension so thick it felt like it was suffocating me. Her voice filled the car, laced with anger and disappointment, the kind that seemed aimed directly at my very existence. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the culmination of years of these intense, draining episodes, or maybe I was just finally done feeling trapped. Without thinking, I reached for the door handle and threw myself out of the moving car. I didn't care about the pain or the consequences. Anything felt better than staying in that confined space with her rage. The impact was jarring. I hit the ground hard, scraping my hands and knees, feeling the burn and sting as my skin tore. My clothes were covered in dirt, my body aching, but in that moment, physical pain was a relief from the suffocating emotional pain I'd grown so used to. I was trembling, tears streaming down my face, my heart pounding from a mix of fear, shock, and adrenaline. I pushed myself up and started walking towards school, looking like a complete wreck, dirty, injured, and utterly broken. When I finally arrived, I must have looked like a ghost. People stared, their faces a mixture of concern and confusion. I kept my head down, feeling humiliated and ashamed. I had no words to explain what had happened, even if someone had asked. All I could think about was the raw, overwhelming sadness that was settling over me. Later, when I got home, I braced myself for what would come next. But there was nothing. She didn't yell, didn't question me, didn't even acknowledge what I'd done. She just gave me the silent treatment, as though I hadn't leaped from a moving car to escape her. In some twisted way, that silence hurt more than the outbursts ever did. We never spoke about that day, never revisited what had happened. It was as though the incident had simply vanished into thin air, erased like all the other painful memories I'd learned to bury. It's been years, and I still carry that moment with me, like an old wound that never really healed. I've been thinking a lot about that day. I jumped out of the car, how it's haunted me all these years, shaping the way I view my relationship with my mother, and even myself. For so long, I thought I'd left it all in the past, but recently it's become clear that some things never really go away. A few weeks ago, something strange happened. Out of the blue, I got a call from my mother. She rarely calls me anymore, so my stomach dropped when I saw her name on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity or maybe something else got the best of me. Her voice sounded hollow, distant, almost as if she'd been holding on to something heavy. She asked, with a tension I didn't recognize, if we could meet for coffee. Part of me wanted to decline, but a bigger part of me needed answers. So, we met at a small cafe on the edge of town, a place neutral enough to keep both of us from feeling cornered. I was nervous, hands fidgeting as I waited for her to arrive, dreading what she might say. When she walked in, I could see that age had softened her. She looked tired, worn in a way I hadn't noticed before, like someone who'd spent years carrying around things she couldn't let go of. She sat down across from me, and for a moment we just stared at each other in silence, like strangers. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, she finally brought up that day. She didn't outright apologize, but she asked, "Why did you jump out of the car?" Her words hung in the air, tense and fragile, as if she didn't really want to hear the answer. My mind raced back, replaying every detail, every feeling. I wanted to tell her the truth, that I felt suffocated, terrified, like a caged animal desperate for a way out. But something held me back, and I only managed to say, "I didn't feel safe." She looked away, biting her lip, and for a split second I saw what I thought might be regret flash across her face. Then, as quickly as it had come, it vanished, replaced by her familiar mask of stoic indifference. She just nodded, like it was all she could offer. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable, until finally she muttered something about how the past is the past. I wanted so badly for her to say more, to acknowledge the years of silence and pain that had followed that day. But she didn't. Instead, she left the conversation unfinished, just as she'd done with so many others before. When we parted, I felt emptier than when I'd arrived. as though I'd opened up an old wound only to find it still festering beneath the surface. Since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what she said, or, more accurately, what she didn't say. It's left me feeling stuck, like I'm still that 17-year-old trying to find a way out. I keep wondering if this is just how things will always be between us, or if I'm finally close to breaking free. It's been a few months since that strange, unresolved coffee with my mother, and I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what I really want. I've come to realise that I've been waiting for something from her, an apology, an acknowledgement, anything that might make the past feel less heavy. But each time, she's met me with silence or half answers, leaving me right back where I started. I think I always knew deep down that she'd never give me what I needed. Still, a part of me held on to hope, as if one day she'd wake up and see the damage left behind. Then last week, something happened that forced me to confront everything. I was cleaning out old boxes in my closet when I found a journal I'd kept when I was 17. As I flipped through those pages, I was struck by how lost, angry, and scared I was back then. My younger self had recorded everything, each fight, every cold silence, and of course that day I jumped from the car. It was all there in painful detail, like a letter from the past, pleading to be heard. Reading those words, I felt a surge of compassion for that young version of me. She was alone, navigating something no one that age should have to face, and no one, not even her mother, came to her rescue. I realised then that the closure I was searching for wasn't something my mother could ever give me. She was too tangled up in her own issues, her own pain, to be the mother I needed her to be. Maybe she was never capable of it. So I decided it was time to let go. Not to forgive, exactly, because I don't know if I can ever fully forgive her, but to release myself from the weight of that past. I sat down and wrote a letter, pouring out everything I'd wanted to say over the years, how her outbursts made me feel small and powerless, how her silence afterward hurt more than the anger ever did, how jumping out of that car felt like the only escape I had. I didn't hold back, but I didn't write it to hurt her either. I wrote it to finally speak my truth, even if she'd never fully understand. I thought about sending it to her, but in the end, I decided not to. Instead, I burned it, watching the paper curl and blacken until it was nothing but ash. It felt final, like releasing a part of myself that had been trapped in that memory for so long. Since then, I've felt a strange sense of peace. I still have my scars, both literal and emotional, but they don't feel as raw anymore. I'm no longer that teenager trapped in a cycle of anger and silence. I'm an adult now, and I'm learning that I don't need her acknowledgement or her apologies to heal. My mother and I still have a distant relationship. We talk every so often, but I keep it light and superficial. I've accepted that this is all she can give, and it's okay. I'm building my own life now, one that isn't defined by her or by that day. Sometimes healing doesn't come from the other person finally understanding. Sometimes it's about realizing that you don't need them to. And I think, after all these years, I'm finally ready to move forward.